Hello and welcome to today's presentation of On-Demand Learning with the MSU College of Nursing. Today's presentation, Delivering Effective Presentations. This session is 0.25 contact hours of nursing continuing education credit. Michigan State University College of Nursing is accredited with distinction as a provider of nursing continuing professional development by the American Nurses Credentialing Center's Commission on Accreditation. Our learning outcome today, upon completion of this learning activity, participants will state an increased knowledge level and an example of delivering effective presentations by achieving 80% or greater on the post-session evaluation. Criteria to receive contact hours for this activity are to view the learning activity in its entirety, complete the post-session evaluation with a score of 80% or greater, complete the survey following the post-session evaluation, and payment if necessary. At the end of the learning activity, scan the on-screen QR code with a phone camera to complete the post-session evaluation, survey, and payment if necessary. Following completion of the evaluation and payment if necessary, an electronic contact hour certificate will be delivered to the email address that you provide. So again, welcome to this presentation on delivering effective presentations. My name is Larissa Miller and I'm the Coordinator of Professional Development at the Michigan State University College of Nursing. So my presentation journey started in 4th grade. I had to stand up in front of my parents and my teacher and give a presentation about Hera, a Greek goddess. And it was only 3 people, but I remember I was so nervous. And I did okay. I got through it, but I've never forgotten that nervousness. And I have gotten less nervous the more I have presented. But don't let nervousness about presenting scare you off. It can actually be really authentic. I've learned along the way that audiences are really forgiving. There's a little risk when you're presenting. Audiences want you to succeed, so don't be afraid to do more presenting. Today we're going to go through 6 tips, and hopefully a couple of them will resonate with you as a way to be a better presenter. Let's get started. Here's our first tip, set the stage. So what does this mean? Well, it means to kind of set the stage on a couple different levels. Number 1, you're going to want to tell the audience how it's going to go. Tell them what the arc of your program is going to be. What do you hope to accomplish? What do you hope their takeaways are going to be? And then read the room. Try and figure out who your audience is that day. And I don't mean like their educational background, but how are they doing? Are they rushing from one activity to the next? Are they ready to listen? Or maybe there's something that you're going to leave out of your presentation because you find out it's not relevant to the audience you have that day. Maybe you're going to make a little bit of extra time to answer a question that one of your audience members brings up at the beginning. So make a little time to set the stage and talk about what you're expecting to cover. Most people, when they're listening to a presentation, they're really only going to take away 1 or 2 key points. Well, unless you're a nursing student, and then you have to remember like 20 or 30 key points from presentations. But make sure that you're focused on what you know is going to connect with the audience you have that day, and you'll be more successful. So, set the stage. Here's our second tip, low and slow. Low and slow. Here we're talking about your voice, and this was harder for me to learn because there's a lecture voice. Do you know it? You talk kind of louder and maybe a little faster, and that's usually not your normal voice. But think instead of your favorite podcast or your favorite TED Talk. What does that sound like? That voice matters. Low and slow means dropping the timbre of your voice and slowing down your speech pattern. When you can do that, you wind up sounding more conversational, like you're sitting on the couch discussing something. Of course, it matters who your audience is, but try this. Try recording yourself and what do you sound like? Does it sound inviting? Does it sound conversational? Or does it sound like you're yelling at your audience? When you're nervous, slowing down can also help get rid of some of the fillers like Once I listened to my recordings, I tried to change my voice and have more emotion in my voice, and my nursing students responded that they actually wound up learning more because they just connected with it on a different level. So think about low and slow. Here's our next tip. Practice, practice, practice. One of the hardest presentations for me to sit through as an audience member is 60 minutes and 60 PowerPoint slides, because you know that presenter, there is no way they're going to get through that without rushing. And as a presenter, if you start rushing or skipping slides or saying, well, this isn't important, so I'm going to skip it, you can actually make your audience feel like they're missing out on something. So practice. Go through your slides. Maybe even record yourself. Again, listen to yourself. The tendency when you're in person on the day of is actually to go a little faster, right? Makes sense. You have the adrenaline flowing. The other tendency, though, on the day of is with that adrenaline, you tend to want to embellish or stick something else in or make sure you're not leaving anything out. So you add this and then oh, one more thing. And those one more things are killers. So practicing is the #1 way to reduce all of that. You'll get rid of your conversational fillers like You'll really start zeroing in on the content you know you want to communicate. And you're going to finish in time, and that feels great when you can wrap up maybe even with a couple minutes to spare. Confidence comes with practice. In 4th grade, in that Hera speech, that Greek goddess speech, I practiced that a bunch. And I got through it. I wound up doing it with no notes. But it's also okay to use notes. So as a musician, I know I've had performances also where I haven't practiced, and those were definitely my worst performances. So our tip here, practice, practice, practice. Here's our next tip, pictures over words. So one way to get people to really focus on what you're saying is to use pictures over words on your slides. And here's why. As soon as your audience sees the picture, they're going to understand the picture, and then they're going to switch to listening to you. If there's a bunch of words on the screen, now they have to do 2 cognitive tasks. They have to read the words on the screen and they have to listen to what you're saying. And most people are not cognitive learners. So then it becomes really hard for them to do both of those things. Most people are actually visual learners. So less words and more time to absorb them can mean that your message gets heard and gets remembered. Here's a fun fact. This painting is by Vincent van Gogh. It's a painting on the screen of some sunflowers, and that bright yellow paint was brand new at the time. And Van Gogh had to paint these flowers really fast before they wilted. That's actually another tip. Audiences remember fun facts. Their ears perk up. You may kind of distract them if their mind was wandering. If you tell them it's a secret or a little known fact, well, now you're building some connections with that group, and they're going to remember those things. Here's our next tip, hand it off. Make sure that you are transferring that useful information to your audience. And there's a couple of ways to do that. Numbers are kind of hard to remember, but single nuggets, information that can be used by your audience is easiest to remember. Stories are easier to remember, and we see this in our culture as we pass down our history through storytelling. I told you that story about me in 4th grade for the same reason. Hand it off can also mean to charge your audience, inspire your audience to take your information and do something with it. Instead of just being passive absorbers, sponges, give them a task. Give them the inspiration to take what you're trying to communicate and do something with it. Maybe that's homework to continue to look something up, or maybe that's homework to go to their organization and try and make a change. Hand it off can also mean to hand off the talk itself. Pause. Ask people to chime in. Hand it off to them. Maybe they can give their personal takes on things or their personal stories. Do a check-in and see what they've gotten out of your information so far, and then hand it off. Challenge them to take it to the next level. All right, this is our last tip. Wrap it up. And that means end on time. Maybe even end a little early. Summarize your takeaway, summarize your message. What were those key points you wanted to give to your audience? If they hear nothing else, you're wrapping it up and putting a bow on it and giving it to them with these final moments. Summarize that homework task that you're going to give to them. Ask for people's takeaways or their stories or their input. Ask them what they might use from your information. And remember, end on time. That's this tip. Wrap it up. Okay, so now it's your turn. From our presentation today, I've got 6 pictures on the screen. Can you remember what each of these pictures meant? Can you remember what we were trying to cover in these 6 different sections? See if you can name what each of these was. And then, which one was your favorite? I've tried to give you an example of how you can wrap it up with something just like this, combining your final thoughts on a final slide, making it easy for people to remember those key nuggets, remember the personal stories, remember easy takeaways. Do you remember the fun fact about the color of paint in the sunflowers? Do you remember my story about being a musician and practicing? So think about what you can do a little bit differently in your presentations to have people remember what you're saying, to get done on time, to not panic over being an effective presenter, but to be yourself. And remember, practice and your authentic self are going to lead to the biggest success of being an effective presenter. So now we're at the end of our presentation, and I'm going to help you connect with the next part of this learning activity, which is your post-session evaluation. So on the screen right now is a QR code. If you'll scan that with your phone's camera, that will take you to our post-session activity evaluation survey. Please complete the post-session evaluation and give us some feedback on this activity as well. After you've completed the post-session evaluation, your continuing education certificate will be provided electronically to the email address that you provide. So thank you so much again for joining us, and we hope to see you next time at our next activity.